In today's video, we are talking about all the things that I wish I had learned in college about classroom management and behavior, all the things they didn't tell you, but they should have. Hi, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Rachel from the Behavior Check-In, and I'm a behavioral coach and teacher in Florida. I'm also a parent to a neurodiverse child, and I'm neurodiverse myself. So I've been teaching for about 8 years, and I've done some other videos where I've talked about things I wish I'd learned in college. But the fact about teaching is there's just some things they don't teach you in the classroom, and you just learn through experience. And classroom management is one of those things. So my very first tip that I share with anybody who's willing to listen, if they want to listen to me, is that I was always told, this is the old like wives' tale advice, is come in hard and you can ease up through the school year. Well, that's nice in theory. I have found that with the children that we teach nowadays and just the expectations of nowadays, that is not always the best. I do truly believe that relationships are important, and if you come in too hard, too rigid, too closed off, you are not going to build that rapport with students, and that is going to make your year harder. What you should do by taking that advice and kind of modernizing it to what we need now is you really should come in with strong routine and procedures and expectations that are consistent, and keep those throughout the year. Do not slack on those, and spend the beginning part of the year really teaching those expectations. The first 2 weeks really are about routines, expectations, and just building relationships with students. They aren't really about academics at that point, because if you don't teach those foundational things, you're going to be suffering the rest of the school year. You will be reteaching them over and over and over and over again, and feel like you want to beat your head against the wall because the students never mastered those things. So you need to set them up in the beginning, and then you also need to model the expectation of what you want to see for your students. So if you're asking your students that you don't want them on their cell phones, then you shouldn't be on your cell phone. You know, common stuff like that. Children can really see through do as I say, not as I do. So you want to lead as a strong example in the classroom of the expectations, and refer back to them when you are having to bring down a consequence to students. We are having to do this consequence because you didn't follow this rule, that sort of thing. Make sure that those two things are connected, and so that the student knows why, that they are in trouble because they violated this rule. And it's always really important to, I believe, to let them know when you're giving them that first warning, remember, the expectation in the class is you won't talk when I'm talking. I need you to please wait. That is your warning. Those are the kinds of things you want to do so that they know what you're asking of them. The other thing is to be patient with yourself and your students. You will be reteaching behaviors. There are just points in the year where the reteaching of expectations just happens to come naturally, and that is usually around after breaks. That is when you have new students come in, and you can really tell when you need to do those. And when I taught elementary school, primary age children, we reviewed our rules and expectations every single morning in the room. We did it in a fun way. I would remind kids, what's my #1 rule? And they'd respond back with, be safe, because that is the #1 rule in my classroom. And we would talk about, what does being safe look like? And then I'd be like, can someone show me their hands and show me, like, raise their hand and show me what being safe looks like? And someone would model it. And we would do those kinds of things in class. And that was something that was really helpful to revisit, because a lot of times behavior and acting appropriately is not something that is innate. And if a child comes from a home where those expectations aren't set, if they haven't had those expectations set in the school setting, then they really need that constantly reinforced and modeled for them. One thing they never taught me that I think is really important to remember, especially when you're working with students that are in the junior high, especially if you're working with students who maybe have behavioral challenges, but honestly, you know, you want to build those relationships with kids, but you still need to keep a boundary. And I heard this a lot online from other teachers, but I couldn't agree more. You need to keep a boundary. I don't post pictures of my children or my husband or anything super personal around my room. And it's not because I don't want to share that with my students, but it's because I do work with students that have had a lot of trauma, and a lot of times when they're mad at me, they want to go really personal. That's just a natural human response. When someone hurts you, you want to hurt them back in the worst possible way. And one way to hurt people back is a lot of times saying mean things about their kids or their family members. Personally, you can insult me all day long and I'm gonna be okay. I know that you are just a child and you're struggling, and I can move on. I'm secure with myself. But it does get a little bit harder when sometimes someone wants to make a personal attack against like your child or your family member. So I try to keep that separate. And I think that that is probably for the best, because it's harder for us to control ourselves when we feel like, at least for me, Mama Bear comes out. If you want to see something nasty about my kid, that might make me more angry. So I don't bring those sorts of things into school, because I don't want someone either saying nasty things or retaliating by like throwing the pictures or that sort of thing, which can happen in a behavioral classroom. And I think it is important just to set that boundary. You are their teacher and you will listen, but they don't need to know every single thing about you. I know that therapists do this, and they do it to stay as an impartial party that listens. And I think in teaching, we have set this precedent that we need to be everything to our students, and that is causing burnout for us. And I think that we need to get back to setting those clear boundaries again and not blurring those lines. We aren't a parent, we are a teacher. And I think if you make it too close and too personal, the nature of the beast is with teachers is we come in students' lives and we leave students' lives. They go on to a different grade. And if we build too strong of a relationship where those lines are blurred, it can really cause issues and separation for some of our students, and that is not kind in the long run. I know we all have seen those movies where these kids and their teachers get super close, but I don't always think that's a healthy boundary for the student, because like I said, we come and go. That's not fair to them, and I don't think it's fair for the teachers, because that creates that expectation that we have to completely sacrifice our families and our lives outside of work for our students, and that's not a healthy boundary for teachers, and that causes burnout, and that causes a lot of frustration. If a student gets angry with you, it's harder to kind of step back and be impartial, and you're more likely to take things personal. And that is not something that I learned in college. It is something I learned, unfortunately, through the School of Hard Knocks. And when I first started teaching, felt like I had to give all of myself, and I had to realize, you know what, I'm not this child's parent, and that is not my role. And they have parents, and I need to keep myself where I need to be in my role. Hopefully that's coming across like the way that I mean it to, and not callous. Hopefully you understand what I'm meaning. Of course, if you don't, we can always clarify it more in the comments, but I just think that we do need to remember our role as professionals, and sometimes getting too personal, having all the personal things can be a little too much. There definitely is a delicate balance between expressing your personality, finding things that are relatable to them, sharing a little bit about your life and your experience as a mentor, and then completely blurring the lines and making them feel like they're completely involved in your life. I don't think that that's a healthy thing to do, so I don't recommend that for teachers. You want to be that person, that teacher in school, and that's just my recommendation. And I think it helps when the behaviors get really extreme and the behaviors get really personal, because it does happen in this field, especially if you are a behavior teacher, and it can get like really hard on your mental health. And if you want to stay in this field, not get burned out. I don't bring things to school that I love and cherish. I don't bring in family heirlooms and things that are deeply personal to me, because if you work in a behavioral classroom, a special education classroom, honestly, from what I'm seeing online, a general education classroom, your stuff is gonna get ruined, to be honest. Kids, if it's stuff that they use on a daily basis, it's just gonna get used and used and used, and it will break, and they touch stuff on your desk. Kids struggle with boundaries. That's just part of development. And you could get something that you really care about ruined. So I have a lot of things that I love. I keep them at home. That's where they belong. They don't need to be at work. I can enjoy them at home, because I brought in stuff that meant a lot to me when I was like a newer teacher and I didn't really think better. And, you know, cups that I cared about that got chucked across the room, and pictures of things that I cared about. And that kind of stuff just needs to stay home. That way you can control and regulate yourself. If a behavior happens, then you can manage yourself better because your prized possession didn't just go across the room. It's just something that's just another thing in the classroom. And yeah, it stinks. You're not happy they threw it across the room, but it's not personal in that attack. And I think it's also really important to keep your things locked up and safe. Things, you know, are more expensive that you have in your classroom, keep those behind lock and key. Kids just get into things. And if you do have a behavior, every time I've seen a classroom disruption, which do happen in special education, I'm going to be very clear, it is part of it. Dysregulated children, upset children tend to throw things out of anger. I think in the moment it makes them feel better. I don't always think it's a personal attack. I think of it like when you're frustrated and you want to go to those places, you want to bang and throw stuff, and they just don't have the regulation and the wherewithal to realize at that moment that they're damaging other people's stuff. I've been pretty lucky that most of my students don't damage my personal property, but it has happened in the past, and I just don't want to see that for you. And then, like I said, if you want to keep yourself from getting burned out and harboring anger towards a child, just, yeah, keep your stuff up. You'll feel a lot better about it. I know I kind of went off on tangent on that, but I do think that that's very important. I've seen a lot of adults get really upset when it's like, you destroyed my thing. I've been like that. You've destroyed my thing. And it can really like get to you. One thing that's really important, and they didn't talk about this, but I learned this more through my personal like research and understanding of behavior training and observing teachers and observing classrooms. Make sure you are praising way more than you are criticizing. I cannot tell you how many times I have watched someone in the classroom, and I know I've done it too, so I'm not throwing stones at anybody, but I don't think we realize that we throw out a lot more criticism than we do praise, and that language does get internalized by the student. I want you to think, don't think I'm the adult, they're the student, I'm doing my job. Think about how you would feel if you had a principal that was constantly like criticizing you and never gave you any praise. It would be a very upsetting thing. You would not like that person. You talk trash about that person. You complain about that person. You come home and complain about that person. You wouldn't want to be around that person. It's the same thing for kids. And I'm not saying don't call them out when you need to call them out. You know, that you are a teacher, you are redirecting. But think about how you're giving those call outs, those redirections. Think about how you're using praise, and are you being genuine with your praise, and are you making sure that when a student does the desired behavior, you're letting them know you appreciate it. And also understanding how a child likes to be praised. Some children hate public praise. So there's other ways that you can kind of show them that you like what they're doing, even with a smile or just like a little, you know, like a little tap on the desk, a little thumbs up, just something kind of private, a secret handshake you have between the two of you, a private conversation later, you know, at the door as they're heading out. Whatever it is, just make sure that you're doing it. And don't get caught in I hate like the backward praise. It's like, wow, well, thank you for coming in today and actually doing some work. I really like it when you actually do some work. That's not a compliment, and that really irritates kids. Like if you have a child that maybe never does any work and they've done work today, you could just say, I really enjoyed how you contributed today. You have such great ideas. That would probably be a better way of praising. But I've seen a lot of passive aggressive praise, and that is something that we want to avoid with students. Those kind of things kill relationships. And I just want you to think about how you talk to your students. Think about how you would want to be talked to by your principal. It's the same concept. Try to keep it respectful and polite. And I think you'll have a lot better outcomes with your classroom management. On that same note, I think it's really important to shift our mindset about that kid. We all have that one student or several students in our class that just grates on our nerves. Our personalities clash. It feels like they do everything they possibly can to irritate you, and you just really dread when they walk into the door. I've had these students before, and it's so funny what a mind shift change can do, because they have literally gone from a student that I struggle to even be around to one of my favorite students. And a lot of it was a mind shift change. And one of the things that I did, and this is nothing that they taught me in school, it is just something that has helped me along the way, was I made a list of all the things I liked about that student. And I tried to make sure to, once again, use the compliments that I talked about that were genuine, to try to compliment them on the genuine things, to try to get to know them, to try to talk to them about things that weren't school related and times that weren't school times. Like we were out at recess, ask them a question, or ask them a question at lunch, or in the morning at those times, and not always have a contingent on school, and try to build that rapport and try to just really see the good in the kid and actively look for the good in the kid. And that really did help. And the student could tell you were being genuine as well. And I noticed that when I made that mental shift, I got love in return from that student. And that really did help in the long run in helping my classroom management and my relationship with the student and overall their learning outcomes. But it took a lot of effort on my part. And I know some people are frustrated about that right now and they feel like, why should I have to do all the work? Well, in the situation, you are the adult and they are the student. You should have to do a little bit more work in terms of building that relationship because you have those skills that this child does not have. Another thing that is really important is avoiding power struggles. And this is really hard, especially at the junior high setting. Power struggles at their core are very ego-driven. They're ego-driven for the teacher, they're ego-driven for the student. Everybody wants to save face. The teacher doesn't want to look like they're losing authority, and the student wants to look cool in front of their buddies. Power struggles are best avoided when you handle conflict with a student privately. You don't necessarily have to solve all the discipline problems right there in the moment. You can hold things out for later, for after class. If a student is not disrupting the classroom learning environment, you can just move away from whatever it is and just accept that maybe at that moment they're not doing any work for you, and walk away and work with the other kids who are doing work, and then come back later and work with them or address the negative behavior that you didn't like. See if you can collaboratively problem solve with them and find out why they weren't doing those things. I have more videos on that if you would like to go back and reference them. But I highly recommend avoiding some of these conflicts publicly and trying to check your ego at the door a little bit. This isn't a competition of who wins and who gets the last word. I think we get very caught up on consequences and they have to happen now and they have to be immediate. In certain situations they do, but with task avoiding, you can hold them off to a little bit later at the appropriate time so you can teach the skill. There's a whole lot that goes into the function of the behavior, and there's more underneath the surface than you may know. And also power struggles just really derail the learning environments, and they can really just keep us at the nobody learns, because there are kids that will go all day long with you because they've got all day. And a lot of them avoid work by getting in power struggles with you, by asking you off-topic questions, by getting you irritated so that you're constantly redirecting and dealing with your behavior and calling admin and losing all of instruction. Some of them like that chaos. They like that control. They are in control of being out of control in that moment. They are running the room. And you can take a little bit away from them on that by just saying, all right, well, you're gonna do that. I'm gonna go over here and work with these kids, and I'm gonna come back to you, but right now this is what I'm doing. So you're just gonna hang over there. That's kind of how you can handle power struggles. Sometimes when I'd see a kid and they wanted to do that with me, like, we're not talking about that right now. And I get back on topic and do what I need to do and just do my best to ignore, and they do eventually stop. You just have to be patient. And when they know that expectation and they know that's what you're gonna do, eventually you'll start to see that behavior diminish. But when they know they can get you off topic, they know they can get you heated, they know they can get you going and spiraling, then they're gonna do it every single time because it gets them out of work. So keep that in mind. Sometimes you're winning by not stopping the learning environment. I think it's really important to be mindful of your space. They taught me some of this in school, but I think things that people do forget is you need to try to keep your space a little bit more neutral. Right now, really super trendy, colored decor, aesthetic classrooms are very in. But is that what is best for kids? The answer is not always. And I do think that there is something to be said for having a clean, organized room. I know not everybody is a Pinterest perfect teacher, and you don't have to be, but everything should have its place. It should be student friendly, kid friendly. They can access things. They can read your labels. It's not in some cutesy font. Like, it has pictures if they need the pictures. They know where stuff is. And it's predictable. That will help with your routines and procedures. That way, if you're out, they know exactly where everything is, they know where they need to find it, and it's not a hunt because the room's not in complete chaos. Also, clutter is very overstimulating to a lot of people. I'm one of those people. I don't like visual clutter. It's very stressful to me. And it is the same for a lot of kids. If there's a lot going on, their minds get overstimulated and it makes learning really hard. Keep the resources up that are necessary to the lesson that teach the kids or provide something kind of calming, but you don't want an overstimulating environment with tons of color and tons of words and blah in your face. That's a lot. Also, you know, I know a lot of teachers like to cook and make a lot of food in their rooms. Smells can be extremely triggering for kids, and that can also lead to behaviors. So be mindful about the things that you do as scents in your room. Be mindful about eating coffee makers, that kind of stuff. When you have students, that might be something that's better for in the morning or during your planning period. If you do that while the kids are in there, that could trigger a kid and cause behaviors. So keep those sorts of things in mind in your room. Messy rooms. I know so many kids that have tried to get out of class because they can't handle the chaotic environment of a really messy room. It just is too much for them and it's very overstimulating. So keep that in mind too. Also, using visuals and keeping your routine exactly the same. I mean, we're not going to do the same thing day in and day out, but your routine is going to be the same to the point where you could be sick and the kids could run the room without you because they know exactly what you're going to do. I've used PowerPoints to direct my room and visuals to direct my room. My students know when the clock hits, we're on to this, and they could run the room by themselves. That really helps with classroom management because you don't have the kids wondering what every day is going to be like. It's very predictable, and that makes them feel safe. And it makes me feel safe personally. I like knowing what's going on. It makes my planning easier, which in turn makes me less stressed out because we do the same routine every single day. And then of course, if you have a change in routine coming up, an assembly, a half day, a field day, any of that kind of stuff, you give them plenty of prep, even put that on your visual schedule if you need to in your classroom so that they're aware of that change is coming. Just because it eases the mind, it makes things a lot more peaceful. One thing that I always do too is I use timers to dictate a lot of things. I found that kids like that, especially if they get overwhelmed with tasks because they know that we're ending this activity at this time and we can move on to the next thing, and that helps them a lot. So hopefully these tips were helpful. Hopefully there's something that's new that you haven't heard of before, or if you have some additional tips and you would like to leave them below, please do, because I would love to share with all the other teachers that we can help build each other up and we can have smooth running classrooms. Thank you so much for coming to my channel and watching my video. If you could, please like, subscribe, and share out to other teachers. I'd love for this to help them. And of course, remember to be the behavior change you want to see, and I will catch you in the next one.
Lightning strikes by my window. It's my chest.